Hey BBN, Pope almost landed in Arizona before Tommy Lloyd did. What would this team be like without Pope? Today? That would be very strange. Let's see what's new. Subscribe to the channel before the news. If Mark Pope had actually landed in Arizona before Tommy Lloyd, recent college basketball history would have taken a completely different path than for Kentucky. Almost none of what happened last year would have come true. At the time of Sean Miller's departure, Pope reportedly impressed Arizona officials and wasn't far from being chosen. Had he accepted that challenge, he would now be leading a top program in the West. But he wouldn't have been the available name when Cal left Lexington amid fan fatigue. This alone changes Kentucky's fate. The arrival of the prodigal son, a Lexington graduate, would never have happened without Pope. Vlasky. Last year's search for a new coach would have been even more chaotic. Danny Hurley declined the multi-million-dollar offer, Scott Drew chose to stay at Baylor, and Billy Donovan stayed in the NBA. Pope's absence from the market would have drastically reduced the options, possibly pushing the university toward a risky choice or a name without much emotional connection to the program. The identity factor something Pope brought immediately simply wouldn't exist. Another key point is rebuilding the roster. Pope managed to aggressively move through the transfer portal, bringing in players like Mo Diabate and Jaden Kentons, who are now giving the team a new look. Without him, it's unlikely these players would have chosen Kentucky, and the team would have been relying on more improvised solutions, perhaps even dealing with larger departures. The atmosphere at the Joe Kraft Practice Center, which gained momentum with Pope's return, would remain tense and uncertain. Furthermore, the relationship with the fans would be very different. Pope revived the emotional connection between Big Blue Nation and its coach, something that had been weakening in recent years under Cal. In Arizona, he would be writing a different story, and BBN might still be searching for someone capable of rekindling that bond. Many of the changes now seen as Kentucky's fresh start, from the atmosphere of renewal to the formation of a competitive and athletic roster, would never have happened. Pope would have made his way in Tucson, while Lexington might be dealing with a coach without the same charisma, with less recruiting appeal, and with a fan base still waiting for an identity. It would be strange, wouldn't it? The Kentucky Wildcats are experiencing a period of renewal and anticipation on the eve of Big Blue Madness, which will officially mark the start of the 2025-26 season. With Pope, the program enters a cycle in which young talent, impactful transfers, and a more physical and collective playing philosophy are working together to put Lexington back on the map of college basketball's greatest stories. Among the many new additions, one name is beginning to stand out both inside and outside the gym: Jalen Lowe, a point guard transferred from Pittsburgh, who appears ready to take on the necessary leadership role for the Wildcats to reach their competitive peak. Lowe arrived at Kentucky with interesting credentials, but also with clear areas for improvement, especially in defense and physical toughness. What's striking, however, is how, in a short time, he has transformed these weaknesses into strengths that are beginning to shape his profile as a leader. According to internal reports, his approach has been one of aggression, confidence, and maturity, essential elements for leading a team in rebuilding. Pope had already indicated that the point guard was a key player in the plan, but now one of his teammates has decided to reinforce that sentiment. Otega Ope, a respected voice in the locker room and one of the most anticipated players this season, publicly praised his teammate during an appearance on the field of 68 Inches program. His words were direct. Lowe has not only surprised but has also been asserting himself in practice, demonstrating leadership and a competitiveness that is contagious. Owe described a player who quickly learned to handle physical contact, who is not intimidated by one-on-one duels, and who, above all, seems to have understood that wearing the Kentucky jersey requires more than talent. It requires personality. This kind of endorsement is no coincidence. In traditional programs like Kentucky, where external pressure is constant and each game carries historical weight, the group's confidence in a point guard makes all the difference. Having a natural leader emerge early in the preseason gives Pope a solid foundation for structuring a system that values both offensive execution and defensive intensity, points he himself had highlighted as fundamental since his arrival. The equation is simple but powerful. If Lowe consolidates what he's shown in practice and Owe lives up to expectations of improvement, Kentucky will have two pillars of confidence on the court. And when you add to that the energy of a renewed roster, ready to compete at a high level, the Wildcats are expected to become one of the most dangerous teams in the country. Not only because of their individual talent, but because there are clear signs of a collective under construction, willing to compete on every possession. What's clear from this early stage is that Mark Pope has quickly created an environment in which newcomers, like Lowe, feel comfortable taking on responsibilities and demonstrating their identity. This early chemistry could be the difference in a long and grueling season. For the Lexington fans, who always demand and dream big, Awa's words are music to the ears. Kentucky seems to be finding the leadership it needed in its playmaking right away, while the path to March is still uncertain. One thing is already clear: this Pope team isn't just banking on prospects, it's building foundations. And Jalen Lowe, with his immediate impact, is beginning to position himself as a centerpiece of this rebuild. Let's move forward. John Sumrall's name has been making strong headlines again in college football news, and it's no coincidence. The current Tulane coach, a former Kentucky linebacker and well-known figure within the SEC, was named by Lane Kiffin as a future head coach in the conference, possibly as early as 2026. The statement not only draws attention to the weight of the source. Kiffin rarely speaks without intention, but also puts Kentucky back in the spotlight, albeit indirectly, as Sumrall is a native of Lexington. Mark Stoops remains firmly at the helm of the Wildcats program, leading a long-term effort that has already earned him stability and national respect. But Sumrall's memory, his Kentucky career, and the recognition he receives from opposing coaches reinforce how the school is developing professionals who transcend the confines of the campus. For BBN, seeing a former player and assistant coach gain enough prestige to be considered the leader of an SEC powerhouse is a direct reflection of the competitive environment Stoops helped cement over the past decade. When Sumrall's name was floated in 2024, amid speculation linking Stoops to Texas A&M, it was clear that his connection to Kentucky hadn't faded. He represented, in a way, the continuity of a winning mentality instilled in Lexington. Time passed, Stoops remained in charge, and the program remained stable, but Sumrall's growth at Tulane only strengthened the perception that Kentucky is now a school that projects talent both on the field and on the sideline. Lane Kiffin. The statement also highlights something larger. The SEC is eyeing the names that can define the conference's next era. The fact that Sumrall is already seen as a natural candidate shows that his education and experience at Kentucky have placed him in a position that previously seemed distant. For Stoops and the Wildcats, this positive association carries a lot of weight, reinforcing the program's relevance on the national stage and sending a clear signal that Lexington has gone from being a passing point to a true hotbed of leadership. While Tulane tries to assert itself and Sumrall works to accumulate victories that reinforce his resume, Kentucky keeps the present in Stoops' hands and the future surrounded by options. The SEC may be about to gain another coach born from the philosophy that was born in Lexington, and that kind of legacy isn't built overnight. It's the fruit of years of consistency, discipline, and vision. Kiffin's prediction is a backhanded compliment to Stoops and what he's built. If Sumrall emerges as a head coach in the SEC, it will be another chapter in a story that begins differently. Leave your comments.